Spell 125 represents a countless disarray of negative protestations by the already dead, a major difference. From a Christian worldview, it is not very surprising that many ancient cultures adhere to similar moral law code systems. The Apostle Paul writes in Romans 2 verse 14 to 15, "When Gentiles who do not possess the law do instinctively what the law requires, these, though not having the law, are a law to themselves. They show that what the law requires is written on their hearts, to which their own conscience bears witness." In other words, there is a universal moral law in the hearts of the Gentiles or non-Jews, implying that all humans deep down have a common concept of what is morally right and what is morally wrong. A good book is What We Can't Not Know, a Guide, 2003, written by J. Bud Suzuki. It focuses on the issue if you wish to gain a better understanding of this phenomenon. They then go to Justin Martyr, who was an early church father and a Christian apologist. He says, quote, "When we say that Jesus Christ was produced without sexual union, was crucified and died, and rose again, and ascended to heaven, we propound nothing new or different from what you believe regarding those whom you call the sons of Jupiter," unquote. Justin Martyr, First Apology. Here Justin is not admitting parallels, he is talking to the pagans, making it look as though there were parallels to avoid persecution from the Romans, since Rome did not object to paganism. As I have already demonstrated, the supposed parallels aren't even parallels, and Justin knew this. To prove Justin knew it wasn't true, listen to the following passage, quote, "But in no instance, not even in any of those so-called sons of Jupiter, did they imitate the being crucified, for it was not understood by them, all the things said of it having been put symbolically," unquote. There he admits there is no crucifixion. The historian must apply that to the quote Zeitgeist notes, where he is trying to avoid persecution from Romans by saying crucifixion was common. Then they bring up the following from Justin, quote, "And if we even affirm that he was born of a virgin, accept this in common with what you accept of Perseus." In regard to this quote, Dr. John Gresham Machen of Princeton writes, quote, "When Justin refers to the birth of Perseus as a birth from or through a virgin, he is going beyond what the pagan sources contained. There seemed to be no clear evidence that pagan sources use the word virgin as referring to mothers of heroes, mythical or historical, who were represented as being begotten by the gods," unquote. In regard to the last quote, which reads, "For when they say that Dionysus arose again and ascended to heaven, is it not evident the devil has imitated prophecy?" Here Zeitgeist misunderstands Justin. Zeitgeist claims, quote, "The devil had the foresight to come before Christ and create his characteristics in the pagan world," unquote. But according to Justin, Satan didn't anticipate Christianity by looking into the future. He tried to copy from the ancient Hebrew prophets, and according to Justin, Satan misunderstood the prophets. Notice that Justin says that the devil has imitated prophecy. We can see that Justin doesn't really have the devil looking into the future to copy Christ at all. He has just imitated prophecy from the old prophets, according to Justin. So Zeitgeist is false when it says the devil had foresight. Also, the supposed resurrection of Dionysus is post-Christian and from the 2nd century. Justin was writing in the 2nd century, so he most likely was not referencing pre-Christian sources or belief, just current post-Christian belief. As for proof Justin was referencing Old Testament prophecy and not looking into the future, Justin writes, quote, "And these things were said to both among the Greeks and among all nations, where they, the demons, heard the prophets foretelling that Christ would specially be believed in, but that in hearing what was said by the prophets, they did not accurately understand it, but imitated what was said of our Christ. Like men who are in error, we will make plain." First Apology. Zeitgeist misunderstands Justin and doesn't apply proper context. They then bring up Joseph of the Old Testament, saying, quote, "Joseph was a prototype for Jesus," and then proceed with listing supposed similarities. Let's examine their points. Miracle birth. Only in the story of Jesus is the birth by a virgin, and is the child considered divine. 12 brothers, 12 disciples. Zeitgeist plays word games to trick the viewer into believing there is an actual parallel. However, Joseph was one of 12 brothers, which means he only had 11 brothers, while Jesus had 12 disciples. Jesus was not one of the number of disciples, while Joseph was one of the number of the brothers, so this is not a parallel. Sold for 20 and 30 pieces of silver. Judas did not sell Jesus, he betrayed him for a price. Joseph, on the other hand, was sold as a slave. Judah and Judas suggest a sale. As previously pointed out, Judas did not sell Jesus. In the story of Joseph, Joseph is sold as a slave. Such behavior is not scholarly, nor is it conducive to those who are looking for any kind of honest assessment. Work at the age of 30. Okay, this is completely false. Jesus did indeed begin his ministry at the age of 30, according to the New Testament, but Joseph began his work of predicting things through interpretations of dreams at 17, not 30. Again, Zeitgeist is being deceitful. So if scholars were to use this line of criteria for evidence, I would make a prediction. Consider the following parallels between Lincoln and Kennedy. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, Kennedy in 1946. Lincoln was elected president in 1860, Kennedy in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. Both of their wives lost their children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both were shot in the head. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both successors were named Johnson. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. Both assassins were known by 3 names. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. Booth ran from a theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Booth and Oswald were assassinated before their trials. Before Lincoln was assassinated, he visited Marilyn Monroe. Before Kennedy was assassinated, he visited Marilyn Monroe. One can begin to understand why parallels have not persuaded the majority of today's scholars. Aside from Zeitgeist's parallels being wrong, parallels mean nothing. Zeitgeist then attacks the historicity of Jesus and the extra-biblical sources where they make the false statement that only 4 sources are typically used. They list Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, and Tacitus, and say they only say a few sentences at best. This is a false statement. Tacitus wrote a long statement on Jesus and Christians in the Annals. Tacitus not only referenced Jesus, but we can learn a lot from his writings. For example, Christians were named for their founder Christus, who was put to death by the Roman procurator Pontius Pilate during the reign of Emperor Tiberius. His death ended the superstition for a short time, but it broke out again, especially in Judea, where the teaching had its origins. His followers carried out a doctrine to Rome. When the Great Fire destroyed a large part of the city during the reign of Nero, the emperor placed the blame on the Christians who lived in Rome. Tacitus reports that this group was hated for their abominations. These Christians were arrested after pleading guilty, and many were convicted for hatred for mankind. They were mocked and then tortured, including being nailed to crosses and burnt to death. Because of these actions, the people had compassion for the Christians. Tacitus therefore concluded that such punishment were not for the public good, but were simply to glut one man's cruelty. So Zeitgeist is being very deceitful when saying a few sentences at best, and it only references Christos, which is not Jesus. Obviously it is Jesus if you read Tacitus. They reference Suetonius. Suetonius writes, quote, "Because the Jews at Rome caused continuous disturbances at the instigation of Christos, he expelled them from the city. After the great fire at Rome, punishments were also inflicted on the Christians, a sect professing a new and mischievous religious belief," unquote. From Suetonius we learn of the expulsion of the Jews from Rome, and that it was Christ who caused the Jews to make the uproar in Rome, apparently by his teachings. The second reference includes the use of the word mischievous to describe the group's beliefs, and the term Christians to identify this group as followers of the teachings of Christ. As for Pliny the Younger, his letter is so lengthy I have to summarize here. He states, quote, "They, the Christians, were in the habit of meeting on a certain fixed day before it was light, when they sang in alternate verses a hymn to Christ as to God, and bound themselves by solemn oath, not to any wicked deeds, but never to commit any fraud, theft, or adultery, never to falsify their word, nor deny a trust, when they should be called upon to deliver it up, after which it was their custom to separate, and then reassemble to partake of food, but food of an ordinary and innocent kind," unquote. From Pliny's letter, we find several more facts about Jesus and early Christianity. Christ was worshipped as a deity by early believers. Pliny refers late in his letter to the teachings of Jesus and his followers as excessive superstition and contagious superstition. Jesus' ethical teachings are reflected in the oath taken by Christians never to be guilty of a number of sins mentioned in the letter. Concerning early Christianity, we see Pliny's method of dealing with believers, from their identification to their interrogation and to their execution.